Great. Welcome, everyone. So this week is Parshat Emor. Emor literally means to speak. And it begins with the laws about Kohanim, about the priests, and about the Kohen Gadol, about the high priest, and temple service. And it talks about ritual purity and impurity that was very important during the time of the temple, and now without a temple is less relevant. Um, but it was really important for the Kohanim to be ritually pure when they performed their service in the temple. Um, and one of the things that can make some does make someone ritually impure is coming in contact with a dead body. So this parsha talks about how a Kohen cannot um, be in contact with a dead body unless they're an immediate relative. And then it goes on to talk about how a Kohen can't marry a divorcee. Um, and it goes on also to talk about Kohanim with like physical differences. And if they can or cannot serve in the temple. And then the second part of the parsha um, just basically lists the holidays and the types of sacrifices that are given on the holidays and the temple service during those holidays. So it talks about Shabbat and Pesach and the Omer, which we'll talk a little bit about today. The counting of the Omer. And then the Parsha ends, and then the Parsha talks a little bit about the menorah in the temple and the lechem hapanim, the showbread that's a nice loaf of bread that's always there, like always on a table in the temple. And then Emor ends in a kind of dramatic, harsh way, where they execute someone for blasphemy. And it talks about what sins are punishable by death, uh, and what sins the punishment is compensation, like monetary compensation. So it talks about how like murder, the punishment for murder would be death, but the punishment for like destroying someone's property would be monetarily compensating them for however much they lost. Any questions about that?
No, I think it's clear.
Great. So the other fun thing we have today is Pesach Sheni, the second Passover. Have you heard of Pesach Sheni by
No,
chance?
I never heard of that.
Yeah, it's very, I didn't know about it also for a while. Um, it's the it's about the second Passover sacrifice. So
Mhm.
it's a day that Moshe instituted um, for someone who was unable to participate in the original Pesach sacrifice on the 14th of Nisan, could do like a makeup sacrifice today,
Mhm.
exactly 1 month later. Um, and a lot of that is because there were people who were ritually impure for whatever reason, wanted a way to still perform this mitzvah, and make the sacrifice. Um, so I think it's really cool that Moshe like listened to the people and instituted an extra day for people who wanted to make us make it up even if they missed it.
Mhm.
Um, and I think it really is like a beautiful representation um, of God always giving us a second chance.
Yeah,
Um, and you know, if you don't do something right the first time, it's okay. You try again, and that's okay.
I believe
Um,
chances. I
yeah,
definitely do. Yeah.
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 Um, yeah. So that's Pesach Sheni. I don't think most people don't like celebrate it in a way today. Some people eat matzah today. Um,
I ate matzah today, actually. That's funny.
really?
It's a little leftover, you know. I really like matzah. Did you try the crackers, the ones that they have now? Matzah crackers?
I didn't have any. So usually I like the crackers so much more than matzah. Um, but in Israel, they actually have these potato crackers
Mm-hmm.
that are much better. So those I had,
I had
but I
matzah.
didn't have.
My God, they were so good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm glad. Good. Um, so yeah, and I know I'm pretty sure Chabad specifically has some connection to Pesach Sheni, but I'm not quite sure.
Mm-hmm. When I was in Miami, I went to Chabad. The one in
Yeah,
Harbor. Yeah, it's very
nice.
welcoming. I really like it there. It's Rabbi
Yeah,
Lipka, I think.
cool.
Oh, yeah. Now it's his son because he was sick.
Mhm.
Chabad Lubavitch.
Yeah,
Whatever.
great.
Mhm. You read this book? Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, we're good. I have not.
I read that it's like for the beginners and it explains
Yeah,
things.
that's great. Is that the Haggadah you used?
No, I have another one. I have like this. But there at our
That
friends'
one I have.
places, they gave everybody Haggadah. But I got this
Yeah,
one.
great.
Okay, sorry.
No, don't worry. Um, so one thing, just because we didn't have last week, I'm just gonna quickly go over um the modern Israeli holidays and kind of what's going on in these days. Um, so do you know what days we celebrated or commemorated in the past few weeks?
Yeah, it was the Holocaust.
So we had Yom HaShoah, the Day of
Yom HaShoah,
Remembrance for the
the
Holocaust.
remembrance of the Holocaust. Yeah. And in Israel, it's a little different day, right? Like a day before, or
Um, no, I don't think so.
no? I read it somewhere. Okay, never mind. Somehow I thought
Um,
one day ahead.
I don't think so. I mean, no, I don't think so. I could be wrong though. I could have just never noticed that, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then exactly 1 week later, we had Yom HaZikaron, Israel Memorial Day. It's the day of remembrance for fallen soldiers and also for victims of terrorism.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a really, I don't know, I feel like people like to mention that it's very different than American Memorial Day. Um, it's a really sad day in the country, and like everyone wears white. Um, and everyone's really a part of mourning because no one is that far away from a soldier who died or someone who was killed in a terrorist attack.
Exactly. It's like a morning for them. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the next day we have Yom Ha'atzmaut, um, Israel
Independent.
Independence Day. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Did you do something for Yom Ha'atzmaut? Did you go to an event or something?
No, we didn't go, but I watched Golda. Golda, the movie.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so it's on the 5th of ER. It was the day that the Israeli Declaration of Independence was signed. Um, and the David Ben-Gurion, who became the first prime minister, um, announced the establishment of the state of Israel.
Mm-hmm.
So generally, it's a really fun day. Um, Something that always happens in Israel is there's something called a tekes ma'avar, uh, like like switching over ceremony, I guess is the best way to translate it. From Yom HaZikaron, from Memorial Day to Yom Ha'atzmaut, to Independence Day. And at least when I was living there, I found those ceremonies really special, um, and powerful. Um,
I
and that's
watched
something that,
I watched it on the 610 channel, you know, Israeli channel.
yeah,
I watched a little bit. Hmm. Do you have
yeah,
that channel?
no,
It's a good channel. We always watch. My husband does.
yeah,
Hmm.
nice,
Yeah.
nice. Um, so yeah, Yom Ha'atzmaut the past 2 years has not been as celebratory or fun. Um, but when I lived there, it was always like a big party. Like the whole country just kind of partied for a whole day. Um, like it was crazy. People would be in Jerusalem.
Hmm.
Um, they would set up these little stages throughout the whole city, and different like big performers, like big Israeli pop stars, would do concerts at these little pop-up stages throughout the city.
Wow.
Um, and like they lasted until like 4 a.m.
Oh
It
my
was
God.
like crazy. Um, but it was very fun. And there's been, a debate about how much we should celebrate in a time like this and how much we shouldn't. And people take different approaches.
Yeah, exactly. The same in
Yeah.
Ukraine, you know, like some people, they just refuse to give up and they wake up, they go on with their lives because what choices they have.
Yeah.
They don't want
Yeah.
people, you know, like Russians to be happy that we're giving up our spirit
Yeah, for sure.
so the same for Israeli people. They keep their spirits high
Yeah.
and pride.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Cool. Any questions about these modern holidays?
No, I'm good, I think, because I read the brochure.
Great.
And then I watched Golda and Exodus.
That's great. I still have to watch Golda. My mom keeps telling me I need to watch it.
It's good. It's
Uh,
it's not very long. Exodus is very long. Golda is normal.
yeah.
Medium movie, you know, 90 minutes. Is it okay? I just grab a water because I forgot my
Yeah,
water.
yeah, of
Sorry.
course. All good. Good. I'll just
Thank you.
Hi, Jeff.
Hello. Hold
How are
on.
you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, thank God.
Good. You feeling better?
Yeah, thank God.
I didn't see the
I
notification.
know there wasn't a there Revenue Breath. I forgot to send out
I better
a
tell
reminder today.
Latoya.
Oh,
Um,
maybe we should text in WhatsApp. Remember that she created the group, Gabby?
Ah,
did you
yeah,
get
if you could text, that would be
are you
great.
part of that group? I never noticed it.
Let me just text them that we're here. Sorry.
Okay.
Great.
I
No, don't worry.
assumed I assumed and I just went to the same link that we had last time. I didn't.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's always the same link.
Gabby. Okay, I'm going to send them a message.
Great, thank you. While you're sending that, I sent a sheet about
Yeah.
the Omer to the chat if you want to open it up.
Okay, we're having class. Latoya brought up Amara last time.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I
But
love
she
the
was
Omer.
counting. She said she was counting. I didn't even know
Yeah,
there were wars actually. I had to Google it.
great. So we'll talk about it more today.
Yeah. She
What did
said
you learn about it when you Googled it?
that it's not for women, right?
Well, women aren't. required, but that doesn't mean women can't.
Oh, okay. So women can. Because the
Women
rabbi
can.
told Latoya that Gabby is running late. She'll be joining soon.
Great.
Let me just open the sheet that you sent. Didn't get it yet. She was counting, and the rabbi told her she doesn't have to.
Yeah, maybe she doesn't have to, but I still think it's good to do it even if you don't have to.
Mhm.
At least for me, it's spiritually meaningful. And one of my pet peeves is when rabbis are like, "Oh, women don't have to do that, so you shouldn't do it." Because not all of the time, but most of the time, even if women don't have to do it, they still can.
Yeah, I agree.
Um,
I
and I'm
like
all for,
mana. I like mana. Like in Ukraine, I used to eat it all the time.
yeah,
Even now, when I go back, like sometimes my mom makes me with milk and stuff. Not with water. I like with milk.
nice, nice. Okay, so right now we're in a time called the Omer. We are doing Sfirat HaOmer, counting the Omer, where we get this directly from the Torah. Um, we count the days from the second day of Pesach until Shavuot, which is 49 days. Um, and the Torah directly tells us to. So it's kind of an easy, we can see where it comes from. And this period of time is the period of time that Bnei Israel in the desert were preparing to receive the Torah.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Shavuot is both a harvest festival and also um, celebrates the receiving of the Torah at Sinai. So these days between Pesach and Shavuot are really um, a time to prepare to receive the Torah.
Shavuot is always at a different time, right? Oh no.
Shavuot is always the same time in the Hebrew calendar,
Oh,
but like all the rest of the Jewish holidays can bounce around the Gregorian calendar. Um, this year it's
it's June.
most of the time in June.
This year is
Late,
June 1st, but I think last year it
yeah,
was late in June because remember.
yeah, it was. It was last year. I think it was like June 20th or something like that. Um, um,
I
yeah,
remember because that was the first time I emailed Rabbanit Braha, and she told me
yeah,
she's a little busy preparing for Shavuot.
nice,
Yeah,
nice
and then after that we had the FaceTime, like Zoom.
for sure. Yeah, I love Shavuot. It's a holiday basically mostly about receiving the Torah, and I love the Torah, and I love learning. And one of the most fun, sorry, one of the really fun things about Shavuot is one of the traditions is to stay up all night the first night and learn Torah.
Mm-hmm.
And from the time I was like very young, like from the time I always went to the like teenager thing at my shul for it, and I always loved it. um, One of my like jokes is that Shavuot was my favorite when I was a little kid because my shul got these little cheesecake bites that I was obsessed with.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and now Shavuot's my favorite because I love Torah. So,
Beautiful.
um, so the Omer, because we call it Sfirat HaOmer, an Omer is a measure of volume. Um, it's a measure of wheat because Shavuot is celebrating the wheat harvest. Um, and it's what was brought as the um offering on Shavuot. Um, so that's where it comes from. Um, during these 49 days, there's like kind of one day that like stands out. It's called Lag BaOmer, which means the 33rd day of the Omer. Um, and this day, there are a lot of things about this day, but it also like stops um, the morning practices that are practiced during the beginning of the Omer. Um, and we'll talk a little bit about um, Lag BaOmer. There are a few different meanings to it. One of the stories is that Rabbi Akiva, who was a very prominent rabbi in the Talmud, um, had a lot of students. Great, thanks. So Rabbi Akiva was this huge scholar who had thousands and thousands and thousands of students. And there's a story that, and I mean, we know the Talmud tells us that he had thousands and thousands and thousands of students die in a plague. And Lag BaOmer is the day that her students stopped dying. Um, and there's the story of Rabbi Akiva with, I think it's 5 new students, starting over again, starting to teach again, basically from scratch. Which also I think is a really, really beautiful story of he watched all these students of his die. And then he still had the strength to go on and teach new students. And, you know, transmit Torah and teach future generations. So we celebrate that on Lag BaOmer. Also, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who's another very important rabbi, but known much more for his like Kabbalah stuff, also died on this day. So there's a big celebration in Merom, which is where his kever, his grave is. And there's this, the most famous Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai story is he hid away in this cave for 40 years from the Romans because the Romans were persecuting Jews and outlawed studying Torah. And it's said that in these 40 years that he stayed in the cave, he wrote the Zohar, which is the foundational text for Kabbalah, with his son also. And then there's this really cool story about how he came out of the cave after 40 years and saw people desecrating Shabbat and burned them with his eyes.
Hello,
He
people.
like,
Sorry I'm late.
Hi,
hi, all good. He like basically shot. I always thought of it as a kid as like laser beams from his eyes, and it like caught the. He saw people farming on Shabbat, and it caught the whole farm on fire. And God was like, "Oh no, 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 no! You should go back into the cave. You need a little time to calm down." So he goes back into the cave for a bit more, and then comes back and is ready to interact with humans again. So those are the 2 main points of Lag BaOmer. And then I guess some say that Lag BaOmer was the day when the manna, the food that the Israelites ate in the desert, began to fall for the Jews after they left Egypt. So we also celebrate God providing food for the Jews and for us today.
So on 33rd day, right? You said
33rd, yeah.
Yeah. I didn't get the sheet. Did you send it out or no? or Rabbanit Bracha?
I sent it in this chat. She didn't send it out because
I'll send
we
it.
forgot to send an email today, but I sent it in this chat. I can send it again.
Oh, I see it. Okay, no worries.
Yeah,
I see it.
great. Okay. Um, so any questions about Spirat HaOmer or Lag BaOmer or Shavuot? We'll talk about Shavuot more because I love Shavuot.
That's true. I really like that. And then, like when Rabbanit Bracha said that I'm preparing for Shavuot, and I did, like I knew all the holidays before I started the
Yeah,
courses, but I never knew this holiday, like Shavuot. And then our friends invited us to their house for the dinner on this holiday. And it happened like at the same time. And, and they made it was so beautiful. It was in the
yeah,
city, and they made very beautiful dinner. Like there were a lot of people. It was very nice. So that's how I learned about this holiday.
that's amazing. Yeah, Shavuot is actually one of the holidays that I think because it, I actually don't know. But it's the least known, I think, of the major holidays. But it's so great.
That's the one
Yeah, I
that
remember.
you're supposed to like study that particular day.
Yes, yes, yes. So we were just talking about how now we're in a period called the Omer, where we're counting the Omer, the 49 days between Pesach and Shavuot. And oh, I'll send you the sheet again if you want to look through the sheet.
Yeah, we have it in the chat.
Yeah, but I think Gabby doesn't have it because she joined after.
Oh,
So I'll
okay.
send it for Gabby to have. Um, if you want to look through a bit more about this time. And then I can also send you you didn't really go through the sheet. I kind of just talked about it, but if you want to look the um modern Israeli holidays that we talked about earlier, I also sent.
Thank you.
Great. Of course. Okay, cool. Any question?
But I still have a question about, so how come they say that we can't count for Omer? You mean they
Why?
can't count the days, or I got confused. I didn't understand.
So, um, there's a concept that women are not obligated in the categories called mitzvot aseh shehazman grama,
Mm-hmm.
time-bound positive mitzvot.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so for example, eating in a sukkah is a time-bound positive mitzvah. It is a
Mm-hmm.
mitzvah that is specific to a certain time, and it's a positive thing to do. Women are obligated in all of the, I guess, negative commandments, all of the do not do this, women are equally obligated in. And most of the do this, women are also equally obligated in. It's just this specific category of time bound positive mitzvot. And the idea, the rabbis talk about it, is that women at the time were obligated to serve their husbands and children, but the rabbis actually say husbands more than children. Um, and that it would be a problem for women to be obligated in serving God and in serving their husbands at the same time, because then what if they had to choose between one or the other?
Mm-hmm.
So they just exempted women from this category of mitzvot. It's funny though, because there are just as many exceptions to the rule as there are like times that the rule applies.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so
From
like for
of interest.
yeah,
Yeah.
so like for example, um, a lot of parts of Shabbat are the definition of a time-bound positive mitzvah, making kiddush on Shabbat. You can only do that at a specific time, and that is something you do. Women are obligated in hearing or making Kiddush. Um, so the rule applies sometimes, but doesn't apply always. But that's the general principle. And counting the Omer is one of the mitzvot that falls into this category of being a time-bound positive mitzvah.
Okay.
So that's why people will say that women don't have to do it. There is a debate that mostly, whatever, there used to be a very strong debate of if women are exempt from it, does it mean that they can do it but don't have to, or does it mean that they cannot do it? In the modern day, we've pretty much landed on they can do it, they're just not obligated in it. Except in some Sephardi communities where the custom is that women cannot do these mitzvot.
But when they say count in the Omer, they mean count in the days, right? But starting from
Yeah,
second day of Pesach till the Shabbat.
Yeah, there's a ritual that you do at night once the sun set. You make a bracha, and then you say, today is the 12th day of the Omer, which is 1 week and 5 days. You say it in like that formulaic way. And then there are other things that people add. Because it's like seen as a prayerful, a spiritual time. But here, I can send you even. Chabad.org, the resource for all things Jewish. But I just sent you the blessings that people make on this.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
I'm going to print it.
Great. Any other questions about? Oh, also, people will call it sphera, which means to count. Sphera, yeah. It means to count, but colloquially, a lot of people will just say this time of the Omer, they'll just call it sphera.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. Finally
Great.
understood it. I Googled it, I read, I still didn't get it.
Yeah, of course. That's why I'm here. Yes, that's exactly why I'm here. Okay, so now for the next hour-ish, we're gonna go back to Jewish history. Do any of you guys remember where we left off last time when we were talking about Jewish history?
Second temple, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you remember any stories?
We spoke about Romans.
Yes.
And then you said that it's a long way to go, so we'll stop at the most interesting thing and we'll start.
Yeah, I do have to. I mean, so many parts of Jewish history are really, really fascinating. And I do think that the destruction of the Second Temple is one of the most interesting events and time periods. And also, we have a lot of literature about it because that's basically exactly when the Mishnah and the Talmud was starting to be compiled. So we have a lot of stories about the destruction of the Second Temple in the Talmud. There's this one. There's so many stories of it I want to share, but the most famous story is about Kamsa and Bar Kamsa. They're two men. And one of the famous lines in the Talmud is the Second Temple was destroyed on account of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa. And in this, so the time, hi Latoya. The time of, so another one of the main refrains, um, is that the temple was destroyed because of sinat chinam, because of baseless hatred, because of hatred among Jews towards Jews, um, for no reason. And the Second Temple period had a lot. Um, it was just a very corrupt time. Um, the temple um, was, there's actually a very cute video that explains it if you guys want to watch it.
Sure.
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 I'll play the
Sorry I
video.
joined late, by the way.
Don't worry.
Doris, hi.
Hello, Toya.
Hey guys.
Okay, you're picking up right when we're starting back and talking about history, and we're talking about the destruction of the Second Temple.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Wait, sorry, I just want to make sure I'm sharing sound. Can you hear this? Okay, sorry, then I have to redo it. There we go. Okay.
12 artists.
Studio Godcast.
You can hear it now, yeah?
Today on Talmud Tales, who would have thought the destruction of Jerusalem would come in this way?
Dude, my party stinks. What happened to Kamsa? That guy's awesome. I sent him the invite.
Hey guys, thanks for the invite.
What the? Bar Kamsa? You have to leave, man. We wanted Kamsa. Nobody really likes you. In fact, you're my worst enemy.
Oh yeah, I'll pay the cover.
No way.
I'll pay for all of the party.
Seriously, bro. Just leave.
The rabbis didn't say I had to leave. Can you believe the rabbis let this happen? I'll show them.
No.
So important context for that is you are not allowed to sacrifice animals that have a blemish. It's very, very forbidden to sacrifice animals that have a blemish. Caesar was the Roman emperor at the time who was in charge of Jerusalem. And Jerusalem was already under siege from the Roman Empire. So it was pretty much universally known that you had to do what Caesar asked of you. That's what happens when empires come conquer you. You have to listen to their emperor. So if Caesar gave them a gift to sacrifice, then they had to, or else they would be killed. So that's why Bar Kamsa, this man who's angry because he was treated poorly at this party, gives them a animal that is purposefully blemished, which he knows the rabbis cannot sacrifice. But he also knows that if he says it's from Caesar, they're going to feel like they have to.
No, we can't sacrifice this calf. Bar Kamsa totally blemished it. But Caesar will be insulted if we don't sacrifice his offering. Sacrifice it is.
Sacrifice!
Yay,
Oh, yeah,
sacrifice.
sacrifice! Whoa!
Hey, sacrifice.
Yo, not cool, guys. It's blemished. What will the neighbors think? We don't want to start a trend.
Or we could just kill Bar Kamsa. Yeah, if we don't kill him, he's gonna run back to the Romans. Can cause a war.
Rabbis, chill out. Is he who blemishes to be put to death? I don't think so. Let's just leave Bar Kamsa alone. What's the worst that could happen? Next time on Talmud Tales. Because the rabbis don't kill Bar Kamsa, he informs against the Jews, and Caesar sends an army to attack Jerusalem. The rebels want to fight the Romans, but the rabbis just want to negotiate peace. The rebels try to compel the rabbis to fight by burning their food and fuel. So a cunning rabbi named Yochanan ben Zakkai convinces his nephew, the rebel leader, to let him escape the city in a coffin pretending to be dead. The temple is destroyed, and everyone is really sad, but Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai convinces the Roman general to save Rabbi Gamliel and gets permission to build an awesome school called Yavna.
Great. So that was a lot of information, especially at the end there. But the story is then Bar Kamsa goes on to inform, to tell on the rabbis. And it's kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back of Jerusalem being taken over by the Romans. But a lot of what was going on in that period too is there was so much infighting. They mentioned it briefly at the end of the video, but there were a bunch of different Jewish sects at the time. The sect that won out and that we've practiced today is Rabbinic Judaism. But actually at the time, that was like the weakest and smallest sect. There were the Kohanim, the temple, well, the sect that really valued the Kohanim the most. And there were also the rebels, who were really, really militant and pretty extremist. And the most extreme thing they did is so the rabbis wanted to make peace with the Romans. They didn't think that the Jews could militarily win against the Roman Empire, which proved to be true. And also, I think is a valid idea if, you're a couple thousand Jews against the biggest empire in the world. It makes sense, but the rebels, this group, didn't want to compromise, didn't want to give in, wanted to beat the Romans. And the rabbis would not agree with them. And to force the rabbis to agree with them, they burned down the storehouse that had all of the wheat and food for the whole city of Jerusalem. Once Jerusalem was already under siege. So they basically destroyed any remaining food for the city of Jerusalem, which forced the rabbis to join in on the fighting because there was nothing else to do. And eventually the Romans won in the fighting. And the vast majority of people who lived in Jerusalem were either killed or taken to Rome as slaves. That's where, if you've seen a picture or been to Rome, seen the Arch of Titus, there's this depiction of a bunch of Jews carrying the menorah and I think the Mishkan, and what's Mishkan in English? And the tabernacle. um, carrying it from Jerusalem to Rome. So that's a depiction of the Jewish slaves that the Roman Empire took back to Rome. And that's actually how a lot of Jews got to Europe in the first place. And then a lot of those Jews who were taken as slaves to Rome ended up migrating up to Germany, and then from Germany east. But during the siege, the Romans weren't only not allowing anything in, but they weren't allowing anyone out. So this one rabbi, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, creates this genius plan where he pretends to be dead and goes in a coffin. And they could, because the Romans are allowing dead bodies out, but not any people. So they send him out in this coffin, and he runs away, and he starts a school called Yavne. Yavne is still a city in Israel. It's pretty close to Tel Aviv. You can go there today. And he starts the first yeshiva, the first rabbinic academy in Yavne. And in a lot of ways, we still have Judaism. He really fleshed out a whole rabbinic Judaism, and sent Judaism on the path that it is today. He saw that, like, without the temple, Jews needed something more. We couldn't just mourn that we lost the temple and not replace it with something. He saw that there was a hole there, something needed to be filled in. And that's when really the writing of the Talmud took off. There's so many great stories from this time. My favorite story is about this woman named Marta. She was the daughter of the high priest. And there's this crazy story of her during this time, asking her servant for like the finest flour, and then the servant coming back and being like, bro, we're under siege, we don't have nice things, I can get you the unrefined flour. And then she's like, fine, then get me the unrefined flour. And then he comes back and he's like, oh, sorry, there's no more unrefined flour, there's only barley or whatever it is. And then she's like, fine, bring me that. And that happens a few times. And it ends up that she was just too late and she didn't get anything. And then the story ends with her walking outside of her castle and stepping on a pile of poop and dying. And it's really this story, I think, of like she was incredibly detached from reality. She didn't even realize that everyone outside her doors was dying. She lived this privileged princess life shut away in the castle where she didn't interact with your everyday person. And I don't think she literally stepped in a pile of poop and immediately died. But I think the story is basically saying, like, she did not know how bad it was. And once reality hit her, once she realized what the people were going through, she couldn't handle it and she died. She's sometimes seen as like the Marie Antoinette of ancient Judaism. It's very, let them eat cake. I just love that story. And she's one of the only named women who isn't a biblical character in the Talmud, which is also really interesting because it's like, why does she merit to get to be one of the named women when, like, doesn't seem like she was really a good person. Like, more background, she also like bribed the high priest for a bunch of things and just is not a good person. Great. Okay, so after the Romans fully take over Jerusalem and all of the land of Israel, many Jews do remain, but they really are under a lot of persecution and oppression. The Romans outlaw studying Torah. The Romans outlaw practicing Judaism. There are plenty of people who stay and do things secretly or quietly, um, but there are more people who leave, either forced by the Roman Empire, um, or to Babylonia, where there already is a thriving Jewish community. One of the tactics of the Roman Empire in general was kind of shuffling populations around. Um, I think a lot of empires did this, because they wanted to they wanted their control over the whole territory to stay. And one of their ways to do that, I guess, was to forcibly move people from their area to another area of the empire. So even those who weren't taken as slaves, they also forcibly moved a lot of people to different areas in the Roman Empire. Um, and the center of Jewish life really moved from being in Jerusalem to being in Babylonia. There also is a center of Jewish life in northern Israel. Most of the Jews who stay move to northern Israel, and because it's further away from the Romans, they can kind of be more secretive and practice in secret there. So there also very much is a center of Jewish life there, but the center of Jewish life became Babylonia for the next 500 to 900 years. um, yeah. Um, so um, we're skipping because we can't cover everything. But then to skip, I don't know, to around the year 800, 900, the vast majority of Jews are living in the diaspora. There were Jews who lived in both Muslim and Christian dominated countries. And different communities had different traditions by that point. It's not like it was easy to communicate between France and Babylonia at the time. Um, but the main difference was the bigger difference was between those who were in Christian dominated societies and living in Muslim dominated societies. And we still see how those traditions are different a lot. In general, it doesn't 100% match up, but in general, Ashkenazi Jews who trace their ancestry back to Eastern and Central Europe, generally those Jews were living in Christian dominated countries, and Sephardi or Mizrahi Jews from North Africa or the Middle East, generally were living in countries that were Muslim dominated. And both groups adapted a lot of the customs of the places they were living because that's what happens no matter what. So a lot of the Ashkenazi shuls will look at least somewhat like churches, but if you go to the old shuls in Morocco or Turkey, they look like mosques. They're these big domes and they're really elaborate and beautiful. Generally, for most of the Middle Ages, Jews were actually much, much better off in the Muslim dominated countries. It was the time when it was the time of the Crusades. So the Christian dominated countries were generally not so safe for Jews. The most famous example is the Spanish Inquisition, where they went around to every single Jew and said, convert, die, or leave. And the Spanish monarchy also gave rewards to neighbors to rat out their neighbor, and such. And most Jews at the time chose to leave. And that's how there always were Jews in Turkey, Syria, Iraq, Iran area. from the time of the destruction of the first temple, but most of the Jews who ended up in North Africa were Spanish Jews who were kicked out during the Spanish Inquisition. Kind of the general practice in the Middle Ages for both Ashkenazi and Sephardi Jews were that Jews were not granted citizenship, but there was this system where if they paid taxes to the ruler of the area, they got some sort of communal autonomy. That also really differed from place to place, but that was generally what happened. Yeah, the Spanish Inquisition, I kind of think of as like the end of that period of Jewish history. But obviously, like whatever, it continues. And actually, the Spanish Inquisition, when thousands and thousands of Jews were kicked out of the Iberian Peninsula, a lot of those Jews actually moved back to the land of Israel. And that's where we got a lot of customs and stuff today. I was gonna show a video about the Rambam, but I think I'm gonna skip it. He was, if you're gonna know one Jewish scholar from the Middle Ages, you should know the Rambam. Maimonides, maybe you've heard of him. He was maybe the most important rabbi. I would say definitely the most, well, okay, top two most important rabbis in the Middle Ages. And the biggest thing he did was he was born in Spain, he was kicked out, he lived in Morocco and Egypt and Israel. I think that's it, but spent his life kind of running. And his magnum opus was a book called the Mishnah Torah, where he wrote down all of the laws. And at the time, it was really, really controversial to do, because before that, there was no halachic guidebook. There was just the Talmud. But the Talmud's really hard to understand and hard to read and not a practical guidebook, because you can read it and there will be 5 different opinions on how to do one thing. So that's not a practical guidebook. So the Rambam wrote in very, very simple, plain Hebrew, a guidebook. And while like he did it to make Judaism more accessible to people, especially because so many people at the time were being kicked out of their respective places of living, and just thrown around. And part of that also meant that there were just less people who had the ability to really read and understand Talmud. The biggest part of the big controversy of this was that actually most rabbis at the time thought it was kind of heretical to write down a halachic guidebook, because it's an oral tradition. It's supposed to be an oral tradition. And most of the rabbis at the time thought writing it down was like too modern. And also the Rambam knew a lot of modern philosophy, and was very influenced by Greek philosophy and very influenced by kind of the Islamic philosophical ideas of the era. So also people didn't like that. A lot of people really thought he was a heretic. which is really funny because today he's basically the only rabbi that all Jews from all denominations and all spectrums love still. Like Reform Jews love him because he talked about the importance of giving charity, and Orthodox Jews love him because he was the first like rationalist. People also didn't like that about him. He was really, because he was so influenced by the philosophy of the time, he was very much a rationalist. He wanted everything to make logical sense. Um, and at the time, that was not the general idea about Judaism. The general idea was we do these things because God says to do these things, and we actually should not make it logically make sense. But it was at a time in world history when logic was really becoming in vogue. And the Rambam saw that, all these books about logic and reason within Christianity and Islam were coming out. So he thought, if we can't rationally explain the logic behind Judaism, then we're going to lose it. But that was seen as like a crazy radical modern move that was not generally accepted. I just said a lot of things. Any questions about that time? Comments, ideas?
I like Jewish history a lot as well, and I wanted to recommend to everybody. And you probably might know him, but the Sam Aronow channel on YouTube, I watch him a lot.
I was actually gonna show a
Yeah,
video,
that's my
one of his
dude. I'm
videos.
like, I don't even remember how I discovered him. I think he just came up on my feed because I'm always watching things about Judaism. But very, very cool channel.
Yeah, I can send it to you. We were gonna watch his video about the emancipation of Jews. So post Rambam, we really start moving into the early modern era. And that is characterized by a lot of kind of Enlightenment and Renaissance thinking. And also the Jews, honestly, like the Catholic Church was the most against the Renaissance and the Enlightenment, but like most religious communities didn't love it. And were very skeptical of new ideas. And pretty slow to adopting this. And then it wasn't until the early 1800s, really, that many of the European countries started granting Jews citizenship. It still wasn't all of them. Many of the Middle Eastern countries at the time didn't have a concept such as citizenship. That didn't really exist. But the late 1700s, early 1800s for Jews in Europe were really characterized by this fight for emancipation, for getting full citizenship. And it was pretty much at the time only successful in France and parts of Germany. But also at the time, life in like your practical day-to-day ways were actually much, much, much better for Jews living in the Pale of Settlement. Is that a term people know?
I know it, yeah.
Okay. I like never know if that's like talked about outside of Jewish history. But the Pale of Settlement is generally like currently Poland, Ukraine, Belarus area, Lithuania, around that area. So at that, from like the 1100s until the 1800s, that was really within Europe the best place to live if you were Jewish. There were many rulers there at the time that invited Jews and liked Jews. and is also like a huge part of why so many Jews ended up in Eastern Europe, because that was the area that Jews were generally left alone and allowed to practice how they wanted. Um, and for most of that time, the end wasn't great, but for a lot of that time, we're not regularly being attacked physically. They just had to pay a lot of taxes, and as long as they paid their taxes, it was okay. Yeah, so my plan was now to watch a video from this guy, Sam, about the Jewish Enlightenment. It's called the Haskalah. I think it's also one of the most interesting times in Jewish history. Um, but it kind of follows directly after this time period of Jews fighting for citizenship. That fight for citizenship that's mainly in France and Germany. And France and Germany at the time are also places like really centers of the Enlightenment and Renaissance thinking. And these ideas of like human rights and dignity for all humans and such were really coming up. And there were a lot of Jews who also were involved, interested in those types of ideas, who also obviously were labeled as heretics and bad. There was one guy, probably the most important Jewish figure in the Enlightenment, the Haskalah, was Moses Mendelssohn. He was both classically trained as a rabbi in a yeshiva in the Pale of Settlement, I think Poland, and then moved to Berlin and was a part of the Berlin academia crowd, and really, really fought for Jews to be accepted within that crowd, and got a lot of hate from the non-Jewish people in Berlin and the Jews. But he really kind of placed the groundwork for Judaism to come into the modern era. And his ideas are really what ended up founding the different denominations. He kind of set the groundwork for what became Reform Judaism. And then once the Reform movement emerged, the Orthodox movement emerged. And then once both of them emerged, conservative Judaism emerged. And then within that, within Orthodoxy, there was really just, this is all within Europe. In Bardi areas, generally people were what we would now call Orthodox. There wasn't really another practice. This also was the time period in history when things kind of started switching. Before then, things were generally much better for Jews in Muslim-dominated countries. This time period, things started getting better for Jews in Christian-dominated countries and worse for Jews in Muslim-dominated countries. So denominations started evolving. Hasidic Judaism started taking over. Denominations were a very big thing in like Germany, but in Poland, in Eastern Europe, still most people were very much Orthodox. And the division was more, are you Litvish? Are you what we would now call yeshivish? Are you into reason and logic and learning as much Torah and Talmud as you can in a logical way? in a like intellectual, logical way? Or are you Hasidic? Are you more spiritual? Um, are you less focused on learning as much Talmud as you can, but more focused on maybe having a relationship with God? Or these other practices, and the two sects really, really, really did not like each other. um, my family was very Litvish, um, mostly, um, and the Litvish community was very against Hasidism, and they thought that like the Hasidic movement was I've said the word a lot, but they thought it was heretical in a lot of ways. They thought they were scared that people were worshiping false messiahs, which is still sometimes an issue in some of the Hasidic communities today. Um, but also, Hasidism becoming a big movement really changed Judaism in the way that I don't know if Orthodox Judaism would have survived without them coming along and making Judaism more accessible and spiritual and feelingsy, and not only focused on learning Talmud, which, with all the respect in the world for all of my Litvish ancestors, they were really only obsessed with learning Talmud.
Is that like a tension that still kind of exists today as well? Because my partner's boyfriend, I believe, well, my boyfriend, his family, sorry, he I think he is comes from a yeshivish background. And I remember someone asked them, like when I first started, getting to know them, someone had asked them if they're Hasidic, and they're like, no, we're not Hasidic. Like very much like, no.
Yes, for sure. Um, I mean, you'll still hear people, my family still will be like, oh, those Chassids. Like they're all like woo-woo, spiritual, not real, whatever. Um, I think it's a little different today in the world of denominations, that like there are other things, other Jewish factions for people to fight over more. Um, but yeah, for sure. Like my family also would be incredibly offended if you thought that they came from like these prestigious Lithuanian yeshivot. Like how dare you think that they like sit in the trees and sing to God?
Yeah, that's the kind of vibe I've gotten. So I wanted to ask.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Good question.
Yeah.
So when you mentioned like sit in the trees and sing to God, um, okay, so can you give me like an example like today that is probably more Hasidic or Litvish, I think that's the word you said, that we see today that I can kind of like get an idea of like what you mean?
Yes. I'm trying to think of um a custom. Do you know Chabad? Have you done stuff with Chabad?
No.
Okay. Um
The only thing I
when
can
I
think
think
of, but maybe it's not, maybe I'm totally not hitting it, but there is like something called like the blessing of the new moon. Is that
Mhm.
still logical, considered a logical thing, or was that more like the trees thing that you were talking about?
So that actually came before this
Oh,
Hasidic Litvish
Metaphorical.
divide. Um, so both communities practice that. I think when I think of modern day Hasids, Chabad is probably the biggest. There also are a lot of different specific rabbis that different groups of Hasidim follow. Um, Probably the biggest movements today are Chabad Lubavitch, Breslov, if anyone's seen like the Nana Nachman stuff, um, those are Breslovers. And then in New York, we have a fairly large Satmar community.
That's
Um,
what I'm talking to you, Chabad Lubavitch.
Yeah,
That's the
yeah,
one I
yeah,
went in Florida.
yeah, yeah.
They're very nice there.
Yeah, Chabad's great. Chabad's whole philosophy is getting more Jews to be a part of the Jewish community. So they're really, really known for being very, very welcoming and open.
I think among all the synagogues I've ever been, that was my favorite synagogue.
Yeah, for sure. They're really friendly and really open and really kind. And one of their biggest ritual practices is called a Fabregen, where everyone sits around a big table and sings and dances and drinks and shares Torah. And like that's a very Hasidic tradition. Whereas like in the yeshivish communities, people would sit around a table and drink and share Torah, but like that's it. Um, I think that's the best example. Because I want to wrap up today. I was planning on actually finishing history today, but we're not going to. So because I'm going to wrap up now, um, I think I'm going to try and find a good video explaining Hasidism and yeshivish, the yeshivish community. And we'll start with that, and then we'll talk a little bit about the history of Zionism. And then that'll be the end of our history thing, unless you guys have a specific area in Jewish history that you would like to cover.
We'll think.
Okay, great. Let me know.
Mhm.
Okay, any more questions or comments?
Oh, good.
I had a quick comment.
Mhm.
You know, I was at it's interesting. It was held at the Jewish Center on 86th Street in Manhattan, like an annual dinner for Vorhan's Stiebel, which is more Hasidish or
Mhm.
and so you have men dancing in circles, but they're kind of more refined circles. They're not so zany as
Yes.
so I think there's the more it's interesting. So there's overlap. So that's why it might be a little hard to differentiate.
Yeah. There's a ton of overlap. Like most things in
Okay.
Judaism, they're actually much more common than they are different. They just make a big deal of the differences. um,
I just think they're a little better. If we put it in a nice way, you know.
yeah. Yeah. And I actually think that modern day Judaism generally, um, modern Orthodoxy is open to both traditions. So like I definitely incorporate parts of Hasidic practice into my daily life, even though I would not consider myself a Chassid, and I very much come from a yeshivish Litvish um, dynasty, kind of. Um, the world's just with modernization, the world's become more open for people trying different practices from different things, and that not being heretical anymore. I think you all should go visit Crown Heights, which is the headquarters of Chabad Lubavitch.
Guess who's from Crown Heights?
It's so funny that you said that because I was just thinking when Jeff mentioned the dancing, I'm like, that sounds like my neighborhood. That sounds like where
Yes,
I mean the
yes,
music, the dancing, I mean late in the night. It's great.
yes.
I'm like, they're having a ton of fun over there. Like, what's going on over there? That explains it. So that's more Hasidic.
That's very Hasidic. That's
Uh,
like the quintessential Crown Heights, 770 Eastern Parkway, which is
I lived
the
on Eastern
main,
Campus, that's for me. So
yeah,
yeah.
the main Chabad shul. That's like the center of American Hasidism right now. Um,
Okay, this makes sense.
yes.
Okay, this makes sense.
But I think they're a great.
Yeah, they're fantastic. They're amazing.
They're so fun and they're
They're
so
so much
joyful.
fun. They're so much fun. Yes, they are.
They're so fun.
Oh, you have fish
They also kind of worship their rabbi in a way that I find slightly uncomfortable.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they have the problem I have with it is they have kind of this like grand rabbi who they like kind of think is it depends on who, but like pretty much think is the Messiah.
Oh yeah, I see
In a way
stickers
that
or like that around the
yes,
neighborhood here. The Mashiach is here, and I'm like, he's
yes,
here.
yes,
Oh my gosh.
yes. And it's a picture of an old man from Germany.
Yeah, and I'm
Um,
like, man, I didn't know he came.
so that's if you're going to talk about like a theological issue that people have with them, at least currently, that is definitely the issue. And I think of it, I kind of joke, but I'm also kind of real that if it wasn't for that, I would be Chabad. I just like can't really get behind the whole the Rebbe is the Messiah thing. I don't think the world would look like it looks today if we had the Messiah here. Um, but maybe I'm wrong. um, yeah. Okay. Any other questions or comments?
For converts who are like for us, for example, I know this is like a modern Orthodox course, I would say.
Mhm.
If you wanted to explore things like more yeshivish traditions or Hasidic traditions, is that just something you just kind of start participating within those communities, or like how would one do that, I guess?
Yeah. I mean, I think if you were interested in Hasidic things, I would definitely point you to Chabad. Um, Another one of the because Chabad's whole ideology is getting more Jews involved.
Mm-hmm.
But it
They
depends on the
have
Chabad.
yes,
Because
yes.
Gabby, you're from Florida, and let me tell you, the Chabad in Bell Harbor is the best. They're so welcoming there and nice.
Okay,
It doesn't feel like a Hasidic community.
that's nice. I'll check them up for sure. I haven't been to Chabad. I've just been to the local like modern Orthodox shul, I think.
Yeah.
Um,
Are you remind me where in Florida you are?
I'm in Hollywood, Florida, so there's a big Jewish community here. So they have there's a big Sephardi community here too. So I think more Israelis have been moving here. So there's Sephardic synagogues, and then there's the big modern Orthodox synagogue for whoever. There's one Lubavitcher, which I'm not
Love it.
Lubavitch. That's
Lubavitch.
Chabad.
Yeah, so there's one. I've been to that actually. Yeah, they're a lot
Nice.
louder.
But the one in Bell Harbor, no, it's very nice. It's also Lubavitch. I guess there are a couple of them.
Yeah,
No,
there are
Lubavitch like
tons
it's not
of
like
them.
loud
Oh,
bad, but they're
okay.
like they like to party almost with their worship.
Yes.
It's great.
Yeah, I didn't see all
Yes.
of that there. There it's like very chill, happy Shabbos, like very nice.
Yes. 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 Wait, I'm just gonna stop the recording just because now we're chatting.